Mabuhay, Kamustika, welcome, how are you? This is Bob from Love Beyond the Sea. I want to talk about something interesting today. Semen retention. Coitus Reservatus. No FAP? Why not just get married? Not exactly dinner table conversation, but here at Love Beyond the Sea, I like to talk about anything marriage related. Today's topic does involve marriage. I believe most people need to be married because of statements in the Bible, but I'm appalled at the number of men who say they have gone MGTOW or are going to live a stoic lifestyle, accepting that you can't change women, you can't change society, they're going to be good being alone, they hope. But what a bunch of poppycock. I will, of course, post the article I will be covering in the description box. Subscribe to Love Beyond the Sea, a channel that wants to make marriage great again, and the notion of semen retention and coitus reservatus is just very strange. It isn't my idea, and I will go through some of the so-called benefits, mental, spiritual, physical, the side effects, how it is different from no FAP, how to do it, not that you should, and risks. No doubt I will toss in my 2 cents, since I was single for 53 years until I got married. I can understand the desire for people without a wife to do things like this. I really can. Most of us struggle with sexual control. I will include this in the controversial collection playlist where you can see my thoughts on things like love dolls, virtual mates, among other things. I want people to see this video. Please share it. I'm serious. Please leave comments if you continue to listen beyond this point. From the article, what is semen retention, benefits, side effects, and more? They say, are you curious about all the fuss around semen retention and no FAP? Well, I didn't know there was any fuss about it. Wondering if there are any benefits? Keep reading to find out, they say. Are you wondering what is semen retention and why many theories in India are built around this practice? Looking to try out no FAP because it's vogue and scared of the potential risks? Want to understand how to hold sperm for a long time? They say we've got you covered. Well, they say here semen retention means abstinence from ejaculation. It is the practice of intentionally not ejaculating or avoiding ejaculation. To do this, an individual needs to learn how to have an orgasm without ejaculating or abstain from sexual activity entirely. And that just makes me uncomfortable hearing that. Now, you might think that this is a somewhat new practice with the NoFap timeline doing the rounds on social media, but that's not the case. They say semen or sperm retention goes way back in history, and Ayurveda, Ayurveda, and supposedly it enhances physical, spiritual, emotional energy in men. Seminal conservation, coitus reservatus, and sexual continence are some of the other names of semen retention. Now, I've heard of this thing in the past, not called that, and a lot of people think that there are benefits to this, so we're just going to talk about that today. Wondering if you should practice semen retention, getting back to the article, and what happens if you hold in your semen for a long time? Keep reading as we cover sperm retention benefits, the science, and no-FAP powers. Hold it, I have to break in here. I don't see how this could enhance physical, spiritual, and emotional energy in men. I can see it resulting in derangement, committing crimes, and general overall misery. I get that some men are addicted to pornography, and I have some podcasts about that on Casting Beyond the Sea that you can subscribe to on Podbean. Some have struggled to avoid sex outside of marriage. I can see why it might seem there is value in having self-control. I mean, there is, and we should. But I think energy should be expended instead on trying to get married. Now, they mention a few practices in which this semen retention is a part of the bigger idea of life. You can see that in the article. The only one I can pronounce is the 5th one, Tantra, Hinduism, and Buddhism. In continuing with the article, talking about semen retention and no FAP, although these two get used in the same context, they're different. No FAP comes from the FAP, which in the millennial lingo means the sound of masturbation. NoFap is also the name of an organization that started with the sole purpose of providing support and information to individuals looking to recover from overpowering sexual behavior. They also assist people looking to improve their relationships. In that sense, the focus of NoFap is on finishing the dependency on porn and not just semen retention. They say to practice semen retention, you can either clearly abstain from sex or learn the technique to have an orgasm without ejaculating. To me, that's like eating without taste and never feeling full. As it requires a lot of muscle growth, they say, consider doing Kegel exercises every day. The benefits of not ejaculating, according to them, are threefold. And they say here are some semen retention benefits some individuals vouch for and preach. Mental benefits: controlled anxiety, increased confidence, more self-control, enhanced memory, improved concentration and focus, and more energy, they say. Well, I think that drinking a cup of coffee can also help with some of these same things. They point to spiritual benefits of sperm retention or semen retention, as in increased happiness, deeper relationships, greater sense of purpose, and a sense of harmony spiritually. Now, I have been married for 6 years, and I have achieved these objectives through being able to use my masculinity the way it was designed. I no longer have to struggle with the guilt, of lack of control. I don't see how semen retention is going to do anything other than drive you crazy and, seem like you're crazy and distracted. And that doesn't happen to be appealing to women. Being sexually frustrated doesn't exactly help your relationship with God, as you can't focus on Him when you are going crazy. Physical benefits. They list glowing skin, increased testosterone, more muscle mass, enhanced sperm quality, and deeper voice. Well, I don't believe any of that. I think lifting weights is a better way to raise testosterone, since you can also actually work off or try to the sexual frustration that is mounting. They did cite a study that said abstaining from orgasm for 7 days increased testosterone 145%. I've seen that before. After that, I don't know what is supposed to happen. And that's also way too high a percent. So even if that were true, that increase in testosterone is going to what? It's going to make you crazier than you were before to be alone and to be retaining, if you don't achieve an orgasm. I think until you are too old to care anymore, testosterone is a gift from God to get you to seek a wife, because the Bible says that sex before marriage is sinful. But Hebrews 13:4 says the marriage bed, where we get the word coitus, is undefiled. What a wonderful thing to know. Furthermore, in Proverbs 5, it tells young men especially to get married, and says, let her breasts satisfy thee always, and be thou always ravished or intoxicated with her love, which is love making. Maybe these semen retention and no-fappers think they're trying to avoid sexual sin, but in my opinion, doing this without trying hard to get married just isn't going to result in progress. Now, a couple other quickies here. They say it may increase the intensity of orgasm. Many people believe that abstaining from ejaculation for a significant period allows you to experience orgasm with more intensity. Well, I don't believe that either. And what if it did? Are you going to hold off as long as you can so you can experience this big thrill? Then what? Depending on your age, it might even come out of your sleep. Those were the days. But you get older, you're going to have to just get married. They say it helps with premature ejaculation. To prolong their sexual activities, guys suffering from premature ejaculation can use edging or similar activities. Over time, the urge to ejaculate might go away. But come on, man. while some techniques can help with premature ejaculation when you are married, I still think you are better off looking for a wife than being preoccupied with preventing ejaculation. It's not a dirty thing. They say it may increase fertility. They say there's no ideal duration for practicing semen retention. It depends upon person to person. Before you start practicing it or NoFap, consider your reasons. They say do not at any cost indulge in this practice for the wrong reasons. If it works for you, keep going. However, if it doesn't, stop right then. Consult a professional in case of emergencies. I still think you will go crazy. Why not keep active, physically active, learn things, and bust a move looking for a wife? If you're familiar with Love Beyond the Sea, you know I endorse aggressively seeking a wife. You can only do so much to stave off sexual frustration. We could talk about this all day. We were designed for regular sexual expression in marriage. They have a section here, are there any potential risks? For those wondering, is seminal retention harmful? They say as of now, there isn't any evidence to prove that it is risky. However, it may cause epididymal hypertension or other ejaculation-related problems. One of my friends, this is me talking, told me that he had gone 14 years without masturbating. Now, the reason he gave was that he thought it was sinful. In fact, he was, by his own admission, terrified of it. And he did get epididymitis. He eventually got married. Let's face it, masturbating is not as good as sex in marriage. Don't you want the best? Masturbation is all about fantasy. You might as well be taking drugs. A sex drive is to make a man seek a wife. We are not meant to be monks. Most men can't handle celibacy. It's totally unnatural for most, and I mean most. And that sex drive does wane over time, so please, time is of the essence. Depending on your age, go look for a wife. Young men today, listening to MGTOW mumbo jumbo and stoic philosophy, listen to me instead. I was single a long time, been married for 6 years. Frustrating yourself to death with semen retention is a tough way to die. I liken it to having tinnitus. That's a ringing in your ears that is hard to get rid of. I think the more a guy tries to have semen retention, the more he's going to be wanting to have semen release. He's just going to go crazy. So their conclusion, no set rules, men can choose to abstain from ejaculating as long as they wish to. Scientifically, there has been little evidence proving the potential benefits or health risks, they say. That is why individuals should figure out what works best for their bodies. That's the end of that article that I will link for you. Well, there you have, my take on this practice of semen retention. If it can help you avoid fornication, then that is good. But eventually, I can see a man, especially a young one, getting eaten alive trying to do this. What he should be doing instead is trying as hard as he can to find a wife. Don't attempt great feats of strength. That's what the Olympics are for. Get married. Let me be clear that I am not suggesting, that people ought to just rush headlong into a marriage simply because they struggle living without sex. Yes, it is better to marry than to burn. Absolutely. However, that is not saying that we should indiscriminately and without forethought marry the first woman we see. 1 Corinthians 7, 8, and 9 says, "But I say to the unmarried and to the widows that it is good for them if they remain, even as I." And Paul had the gift of singleness. He didn't need to be married. He's talking to people that were formerly married. "But if they do not have self-control, let them marry. For it is better to marry than to burn." That means to burn with lust or passion. So it is better to marry than to burn. There are some people who do not burn with passion. They are not going to be tempted by sexual sin. Now that isn't common, but some people are safe from that. Another place the Bible talks about the lack of self-control is in 1 Corinthians 7, verse 5, where it says, do not deprive one another. This is talking about two people that are married. Do not deprive one another, except perhaps by agreement for a limited time. That means when you're deciding together not to come together sexually. You may devote yourselves to prayer, but then come again together again, so that Satan may not tempt you because of your lack of self-control. Married people have a lack of self-control. That's why they got married. And that's why any abstinence in marriage needs to be brief, and it needs to be agreed upon by those two people. And the reason is prayer. That's it. So the Bible is clear that most people should get married in order to avoid sexual sin. That does not mean that is the only purpose in marriage. It is a huge benefit and help for a man to be sexually pure, because the marriage bed is undefiled. Hebrews 13:4. Prostitution, sex outside of marriage, pornography, etc. are not acceptable. And just trying to hold it in for the rest of your life would kill most of us. Why attempt such an unnatural and Herculean feat? Who are you trying to please? Sure, until a man gets married, he is to avoid sexual sin, but let's not forget that God has provided marriage to that end, plus a lot more fulfillment from it. So this so-called semen retention sounds like torture to a married man. I like to say this: instead of attempting incredibly difficult feats of mental and physical control, use that time to pray and look for a wife. Go where you're wanted, even if it's overseas, to find a woman to marry. I was single until 53, so I know what the struggles of being single were like, and I know that being married is much better for me and for most people. I made it a point to look like no tomorrow. Didn't give up. I'm also not saying that every man, regardless of his health and mental makeup, is ready to get married. Being married isn't going to straighten anyone out. Issues brought into it will only be exasperated. Maybe it's exacerbated. To close here, from gotquestions.org, I will list that too, because there's more than what I'm just going to say here. They say, with this assertion that it is better to marry than to burn, the Apostle Paul sounds a warning for those caught in the progression towards sin. Long engagements, young teen dating, and makeout sessions between dating couples are all ways that temptation can start burning. 1 Thessalonians 4:3-7 also addresses the need to control our passions. It is God's will that you should be sanctified, that you should avoid sexual immorality, that each of you should learn to control your own body in a way that is holy and honorable, not in passionate lust like the pagans who do not know God, and that in this matter no one should wrong or take advantage of a brother or a sister. The Lord will punish all those who commit such sins, as we have told you and warned you before. For God did not call us to be impure, but to live a holy life. When we refuse to control our bodies in ways that are holy and honorable, we are in danger of allowing the natural sexual drive to turn into lust, or causing someone else to be filled with lust. This is especially true during late adolescence and the early 20s, when hormones are raging, bodies are at their fittest, sexual desire is at its peak, and the foolish or untaught often dive into sexual sin before they realize the lifelong consequences. God's design is for those who burn with sexual desire to prayerfully seek a marriage partner and keep their desires under control until the wedding night. Those who can maintain moral purity should not feel pressured to marry. Singleness is a perfectly acceptable lifestyle, but if one begins to burn with passion, it is time to seek God's guidance in finding a spouse. I think that's good advice. We should try to have sexual control, but the best way is to marry. They didn't mention there 1 Corinthians 7:1-2. It's good to a man not to touch a woman, but it means good for a man not to have sexual relationships with a woman. Nevertheless, to avoid fornication, let every man have his own wife, and let every woman have her own husband. That's what we should be doing. Semen retention, coitus reservatus, no fap, but for how long? I'm just trying to talk some sense. Instead of worrying about how to control yourself, start looking for a wife you can enjoy sex with. Screw MGTOW, screw stoicism. If you have to, find love beyond the sea.